Today we're diving into something that sparks a lot of debate: video games. Are they really bad for us? Or can they actually help with things like aggression, stress, and even building community? In this episode, we'll break down what the research says, bust some myths, and talk about how gaming, when done right, can be a powerful tool for mental wellness. Welcome to Mental Health Potluck, where everyone brings something to the table. I'm Danny Clark, licensed clinical social worker and family therapist, and this podcast is all about serving up bite-sized mental health insights, practical wellness tips, and real conversations that nourish the mind and soul. So let's look at where gaming can actually have a benefit on our lives, and that is with three main aspects. The first one being aggression. This is something that we see a lot in the research, and there's sort of this misconception that violent, aggressive video games then produces violent, aggressive people, and that's just not the case. And it's with all the research that's done, it has yet to be conclusive in any way. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of research that shows that there's a benefit to aggressive, violent video games. For example, there's a study in 2021 that looked at children that were playing these aggressive, violent games, and over time, they actually had a reduction in their level of aggression. And what they feel like is happening is there's this catharsis effect. When we look at the gaming as a way of expressing those emotions, it's a safe environment to do it healthy. If a child or even an adult has had a day that maybe they need to express something, they've got a frustration or whichever, they can use gaming as that outlet to let that free. And that's an important part of our own personal health. And it's just like, it wouldn't be any different from maybe somebody who's had a very bad day and they're frustrated with somebody and they go home and they journal about it. It's a part of catharsis. It's an active thing that they're doing to let go of whatever that is. Another aspect of gaming that's beneficial is what we call stress reduction. And that's where we might have a situation in our day where we're rather stressed, or we have a problem in our world that is difficult to manage, or it's difficult, or there's a time period that's making it hard to get through. And what we can do is use gaming as a way to sort of circumvent that a little bit, to sort of let go of some of that stress. And what it does is that in games, we have basically a problem we're trying to solve. And there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to that. And there's a skill that has to be developed in order to do that. And within that process, we actually have a complex situation that is occurring that we have to learn how to deal with, and we deal with it. And then we move on to the next problem, just like we do in life. And so by playing video games and being a gamer, you actually are creating that environment. However, there are some downfalls to that too. And it's one where if we spend more time in that digital world, that we don't learn how to do it in our personal world, and we're using it more of an avoidance. And that's where we have to be careful with the amount of gaming that we're doing and what it means to be a gamer. There needs to be a balance of how you're doing it and when you're doing it. The third piece that's really important, and I feel like is probably the most beneficial, is the sense of community. Gaming in itself has a large community. We see that across the board, whether it's competitions, whether it's Twitch, or whether it's TikTok, or whether it's any of these environments where people come together to play games. What some of the research shows is that when people play games that have a social connection to it or a social interaction in some way, they actually build resilience by playing those games. And what's interesting is that resilience, which is basically our ability to move on from maybe a difficult situation, has a place in these games. And where it has it is where we communicate and interact in an emotional way with people. Now, that doesn't just mean that the game itself has to have a social connection. They also look at it with games such as Elden Ring that has what we call a metagaming environment, where there's a huge community of people that are really vested in helping each other get through that very difficult game. And that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because the game itself brings people together with a problem that they're all trying to solve, and they work on together to get through it, and based on the ability of a skill set makes its way through it. Now, that's an important concept too, because one of the aspects of the study looking at resilience found that people that were in those environments playing those games, if their skill set didn't improve, then they actually saw a reduction in resilience. So take me, for example. I've played Elden Ring. It's the hardest game I've ever played in my life, and I pretty much will never play it anymore because I can't get 5 minutes into it. And it's simply because it's not something I have time to invest in the time to build the skill and work with the community and do all that stuff with. And so I'm better off playing Candy Crush, not just because I'm old, but because it's not quite as intense. However, for people that do play these games and they have that sense of community, there is a benefit to it. So whether you're a therapist or you're a gamer, there is some benefit to playing games. And there's also a downfall to it too. Anything we do too much of and it becomes problematic, it's one where we look at, is it interfering with our day-to-day lives? If you playing with games in video games a lot is preventing you from spending time with your family, from finishing work, from being productive at school, that's where gaming becomes a problem. If you're in the gaming world and the community itself is creating stress and is creating an environment that's conflicting, well, that's a time when that's probably a world you need to kind of remove yourself from. And so it's all a matter of balance. But what's most critical is that as therapists, we are responsible for making sure we're assessing everything that's affecting someone's lives. And if gaming is a part of your life, then we need to know better about how it's working or how it's not working in your world. And as somebody who's been playing games for the last 40 years, I pretty much love doing it. And I find it something I do regularly as a way of releasing some of that tension and enjoying some time, whether it's by myself or with my kids. So play those games if they're fun for you. And if they're not, then maybe find something else to do, like journal or meditate or read a book. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Mental Health Potluck. I hope this gave you a new perspective on gaming and how it can impact our mental health for better or for worse. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might find it helpful. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, take care and keep the conversation going.